trying hard just to make us all vanish. I suggest they put a flag on a whole nother planet. Black girl magic, y'all can't stand it, y'all can't ban it. Made out like a bandit, they've been trying hard just to make us all vanish. I suggest they put a flag on a whole nother planet. Black girl magic, y'all can't stand it, y'all can't ban it. Made out like a bandit, they've been trying hard just to make us all vanish. I suggest they put a flag on a whole nother planet. Black girl magic, y'all can't stand it, y'all can't ban it. Made out like a bandit, they've been trying hard just to make us all vanish. I suggest they put a flag on a whole nother planet.
I'm Leo Sunfire.
And I'm Dr. Love.
Welcome to the Black Portal Power, where we center the Black experience. Open your mind,
For your soul.
for the portal is open. Welcome to Black Portal Power. I am Leo Sunfire.
And I'm Dr. Love.
Well, we're here today talking about some real good topics of,
As always.
Blackness.
Always.
And I
always.
first want to start out by saying R.I.P. to Chadwick Boseman, a.k.a. Black Panther, a.k.a.
King
James Brown.
Yes, King T'Challa. Jackie Robinson.
Man.
I mean, his roles were just iconic. That blew me away when I saw that this morning. Like, it completely blew me away.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, 43 years old, you know.
Yeah, I saw that he was getting a little thin at one time, and everybody cracked a few jokes saying something was going on with him, but to find out he had cancer and he's gone. I mean, we lost a great one, I believe.
An absolute great one, right at the height of his career. I mean, I was blown away.
Yeah.
So definitely rest in power.
Fly high.
Yes.
Fly
indeed.
high.
Yes,
Fly
indeed.
free.
Yes, indeed. So we've got quite a bit to dig into today, and I don't want to waste any time, Leo.
That's what's up.
We cannot ignore the big social issue that is affecting us right now. I think that we have always, as African Americans, been in some, cycle of a civil rights movement, and our current fight for social justice has really stemmed from these continued deadly encounters that African Americans have with the police. And so I want to start with our first topic today, and that's Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
So, I guess let me just kind of introduce it in its history so that we are all on the same page.
Yeah.
This movement, sometimes referred to as the New Civil Rights Movement, began following the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman. And what it did was mobilized women of color to come together and begin this movement, especially following the acquittal of George Zimmerman. I think many of us assume, myself included, and this is what I do. I remember you and I having conversations about this. I did not believe for one moment that he would be acquitted, but following his acquittal and the civil unrest that it caused, these women formed the Black Lives Matters movement, and it has continued since. And again, it's sometimes referred to as the New Civil Rights Movement, in that it is organized in such a way to bring light to these issues of racial injustice. It is focused specifically on police use of force and brutality against African Americans. And so in some ways, it sort of it models, after SNCC, and where, these young people were really, really centered on that particular issue with respect to civil rights, different from the historic civil rights movement in that it is purposefully decentralized, so where you had identifiable leaders before in the civil rights movement, be it Dr. King all the way through to Malcolm X. Very different in this way, decentralized, so that one entity or person isn't really sort of identified as its leader, which allows it to not be attacked and disseminated more quickly, but then also focused based on the cities in which these movements take precedence. So, Black Lives Matters in Baltimore following the death of Freddie Gray may be very different from Black Lives Matters in Ferguson, Missouri following Michael Brown's death. And the point is to make sure that the efforts are localized to sort of deal with the negative police community interactions for that particular area. It also relies on social media, again, something that was not available before. So we start seeing these hashtags, Black Lives Matter, and it allowed that term to just be used widespread, regardless of the differences in the movements based on their respective cities. But it's not without controversy. Right. So it has certainly made some inroads in that it made the issue of police brutality a point of contention for the 2016 presidential campaign. But controversy surrounding it, should we be using the term Black Lives Matter? Should it be aligned with other movements in terms of gay rights, in terms of gay and lesbian rights, in terms of women's rights? So again, a lot of sort of varied ideals around it. Blue lives, all, and then the sort of, again, the off, the what it set off in terms of responses to it, and even, attacks against it. So Blue Lives Matters, All Lives Matter. So again, a lot of controversy around this. I see us as a society embracing it more now, where we were probably a little more hesitant before. But I want you to weigh in on this.
Well, Black Lives Matter is something that's been coined, it's been chanted, and to me, as far as my knowledge goes, we have to be careful what we put in the universe, what we vibrate to the universe. Black Lives Matter is indicative to that I have to prove to someone that my life matters. When we start with a negative tone like that, that's what we're going to get back. I mean, we're not seeing the progress that is what we're looking for, because we're putting that negative tone to it by saying Black Lives Matter. Of course your life matters, you exist. You came in this world, you shouldn't have to prove to someone that you should stay. That's murder if someone decides to take your life. I don't care if they're black, white, or whoever, but to have to explain to someone that your lives matter has set a negative tone for us. And that's why people trivialize it by coming in and saying, oh, blue lives matter. Oh, no, all lives matter. No, gay lives matter. I mean, when you put that out there, that's what we're going to get back. When they've taken what was supposed to be something for justice for our people and trivialized it and made it something that's really a slogan now, a hashtag or something, some stuff like that. The background that I've researched and picked up from this Black Lives Matter movement, they have come together with different organizations and bought like a conglomerate of other justice or organizations for justice for our people. One of the ones that I'm very interested in, intrigued by, is the BAJI. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. It's BAJI, BAJI, the Black Alliance for Justice of Immigration. Then they have the Color of Change. It's online. It's one of the largest justice organizations. It has 1.5 million members. And the movement for Black Lives Matter is a collective liberation for their product. The Undock You Black Network, the Multi-Generation Network, is currently formally foster communities, facilitate access resources, developing, cultivating, and organizing alliances to advance policies that affect our daily lives. Now, these are the things that we could be putting out there instead of the Black Lives Matter, because, again, what we put in the universe, we receive back. And words matter. Words really do matter. I mean, they vibrate and mean something. It sends tones. And when you have thousands of people, maybe millions of people chanting Black lives, Black lives, Black lives matter, you're not getting positive feedback, because that's not a negative. It starts out negatively.
And that's the thing that perplexes me. Why would it be negative? Why would it have a negative connotation? We can document time and time again where Black lives have not mattered, and it weren't even considered full lives, right?
Yeah.
Being counted as, 3/4 of a person, and allowing Black people to be enslaved, to be treated as less than, right, and to not have full citizenship has been allowed in this country. And so to put it in the face of a nation that is philosophically founded on this idea of equality, and say, wait, Black lives do matter. No different than if I were to say, we don't critique, something that has woman in front of it, right? And so the Violence Against Women, the Act, right, which allowed us to formulate laws around domestic violence and the ways in which police handle those. Before, those were treated as private matters. And so the Violence Against Women Act made law enforcement have to step in and do something proactively.
The Burning Bed did that, but go ahead.
But we've got federal law, right? And we don't disparage the term woman being used in that. We don't disparage, the Matthew Shepard, James Byrd Act, which really focuses on making violence against the LGBTQI community a hate crime, right? And so when we have those kinds of federal mandates out there, we don't disparage the use of, identities around that. And so, to make saying Black Lives Matters negative in its connotation, is almost hypocritical, right? I think anytime you talk about anything with respect to equality for Black people, this is why, the term Black Power was considered so offensive, but yet, why?
Why don't we chant Black Power instead of Black Lives Matter? If we want to put power out there, Black Power. That's how you give it strength and momentum and power behind it. If millions and thousands of people were saying Black Power, that's what we would get.
I think that would be viewed as threatening, because now you're saying we want power. We want, right? And what does power mean? And power unchecked, right? We certainly see that in terms of having a society founded and built on white power, white privilege, and white supremacy, right? But to say that Black Lives Matter says, start treating these lives just as important as lives of other people from various backgrounds. And so, I've always been perplexed by that,
Well, one of the reasons why I have come to understand why it's, negative is because just the very reason why it's turned into a business. It's not only just a thing to bring justice for Black people, it's a business now. And you got George Soros, who has poured $220 million into racial equality, pushing for $1.5 million for Black-led racial injustice groups and $70 million for criminal justice reform and civic engagement. We know who George Soros is, don't we?
No.
You know who George Soros is? This is a man that is definitely masterminding a lot of things behind the scenes of what we're going through right now in our society. You can put him up there right along with Bill Gates. And you know who Bill Gates is.
Absolutely.
Okay, so they got the money, they got the power. Now, if you get someone like that behind an organization that is led to push equality or justice they control the narrative of what it means or what happens. Do you see the justice when just the other day a man got shot in his back 7 times for going to his car? And where's the police officer that did that? Where's the justice for Black lives? I mean, you got $220 million poured into this. Where's the justice?
But again, this is what makes me question, especially when these types of information come out. It's a decentralized, right? And so Black Lives Matters, if someone uses that phrase or that moniker, right? What that is in Detroit, what that is in St. Louis, or in Kansas City can be very different. And so the women who founded this organization and then these other entities that began because of it, I think, again, where monies are funneled and how they're channeled into other initiatives, that may be, again, something very different. So we've got to come back to this, but we need to take a break. You are listening to Black Portal Power on BSB Radio.
It's the mystery of iniquity. Said it's the misery of iniquity. Said it's the history of iniquity. When it all falls down, yeah. Telling you all, it all falls down, yeah. Children, eat your bread, little children. Your break, 'cause it all falls down, yeah. Telling you all, it all falls down. Y'all can't handle the truth in a courtroom of lies. Purges the jurors, witnesses, spies. Crooked lawyers, false indictments publicized. It's entertainment, the arraignments, the subpoenas. High-profile gladiators in bloodthirsty arenas. Enter the dragon, black robe, crooked balance. Souls bought and sold and paroled for 30 talents. Court reporter, catch the circus on the paper. File it in the system, not acknowledged by the maker. Swearing by the Bible, blatantly blasphemous. Publicly perpetrating that in God we trust. Cross-examined by a master manipulator, the faster intimidator, receiving the judge's favor. Deceiving sabers, doing injury to their neighbors. For status, gratis apparatus, and legal waivers. See the bailiff, representing security. Holding the word of God, soliciting perjury. The prosecution, political prostitution. The more money you pay, the further away solution. Legal actors, Babylon's benefactors. Masquerading as the agency for the clients. Hypocritical giants, morally non-compliant. Orally armed to do bodily harm. Polluted, recruited, and suited judicial charm. And the defense isn't making any sense. Faking the confidence of escaping the consequence. That the defendant is dependent on the system. Totally void of judgment, purposely made to twist them. Emotional victim, blackmailed by the henchmen. Framed by intentions, inventions whereby they lynchmen. Into the false witness, slandering the accused. Planting the seed, openly showing he's being used. To discredit, edit, headed for the alleged. Smearing the individual, fearing the unsuspected. Expert witness, the paid authority. Made a priority to deceive the majority of disinterested peers, dodging duty for years, hating the process, waiting to return to their careers. Do we expect a system made for the elect to possibly judge correct, properly serve and protect, materially corrupt, spiritually amok, oblivious to the cause, prosperously bankrupt, blindly in the blind, guilty never defined, filthy as swine, a generation pure in its own mind, legal extortion, blown out of proportion, in vain deceit, the truth is obsolete. Only two positions, victimizer or victim. Both end up in destruction, trusting this crooked system. Mafia with diplomas, keeping us in a coma, trying to own a piece of the American corona. The revolving door, insanity every floor. Skyscraping, paper chasing, what are we working for? Empty traditions, reaching social position, teaching ambition to support the family superstition. When the son of perdition is commander-in-chief, the standard is steep. Brethren, can we candidly speak? Woe to the men, trusting in the chariots, them leaning on horses. They run their intellectual sources. Counterfeit wisdom, creating the illusion of freedom. Confusion consumes them. Every word they speak, it then turns them outwardly white. Internally, they absent the light. Them trapped in the night, and bondage to the cane of the night. Under the curse, evil men waxing more worse. Facts in the first. Angelic being cast to the earth. It's time for rebirth. Burning up the branch and the root. The empty pursuits of every tree bearing the wrong fruit. Turning me ill. Let him who stole no longer steal. Oh, Israel, surrender for Jehovah is real. How long will you sleep? Troubled by the thoughts that you keep. The idols you heap. Causing the destruction you reap. Judgment is come, find it and return to the one. Abandon the flesh, self-interest, Broadway to death, pride and greed, hiding, subdividing the seed. The knowledge of good and evil is what caused us to lie, caused us to die. Let your emotions be crucified, renounce all your thoughts, repent and let your mind be retaught. You find what you sought was based on a deception you bought, a perception of naught where the majority remains caught. Loving a lie, not realizing an atom or die. Loving a lie, not realizing an atom or die. Loving a lie, not realizing an atom or die. Loving a lie, not realizing an atom or die. It's the mystery of iniquity. Say it's the history of iniquity. Say it's the misery of iniquity. Oh, and it all falls down. I'm telling you all, it all falls down.
We are back, and we are still discussing Black Lives Matter.
Yes. So you were talking about, like, for instance, in Kenosha, this, our latest city that has just gone up in terms of protest and rioting around the shooting of Jacob Blake, who was shot 7 times in the back by a police officer. And by at least our assessment of what we've seen, this was clearly, at least in my mind, an excessive use of force, right? And especially when you put it in the broader context of the white young man who was walking around with a rifle, an assault rifle, and ended up killing 2 protesters, shooting 3 total, but killing 2. And yet he was taken without.
He didn't even get pepper sprayed.
Without any incident, from the police. So you got, on one end, the police were called out, at least by some accounts, for a domestic incident, where lethal force typically isn't necessary in those encounters, to a situation where and a man ends up shot 7 times in the back, to a situation where the police are there to prevent these type of violent outcomes, yet this young man was able to walk around in the streets of Kenosha, wasn't even from the city, came into the city
to kill.
With the intent of
to kill,
because Wiles bring a rifle to a protest.
Absolutely.
And again, people exercising their First Amendment right to protest. And so this movement has certainly sparked where people have felt empowered to demand for justice, to demand for prosecution of these officers who act in this manner, and who have just went into the streets and demanding justice. So this movement has certainly empowered people in ways that I think are really important. And again, to the point you were making before, it's not without controversy, but certainly we've seen how it has sparked movements across the nation, and so much so that now we have entire sports teams able to proclaim Black Lives Matter.
They don't care about those athletes. They got drones and Android, whatever those little. They're not even playing ball right now. These are not real players right now. They got you looking at artificial things going on right now, AI things. We know that. So they don't care if they stop playing ball. There's less money they got to give them.
But then again, if we look back, to date, almost down to the day, when players decided for the NBA, for instance, they were not going to play in their playoff games that day, to stand in solidarity for what had happened to Jacob Blake. You had Colin Kaepernick for taking a knee, right? Mm-hmm. He didn't stop a game. He simply said, I'm going to take a knee during the national anthem. And so it did cause some uproar. It did cause them to move so drastically to try to prevent those players from doing that. They understand that these players bring revenue to their cities,
Absolutely.
to that organization,
Absolutely.
that they have collective voice and power. And that has always been the case for Black athletes. I mean, and it made me think about, again, I can never detach this from the historical context when you had those Olympic medalists throwing their fist in
Absolutely.
the air, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
as a show of Black power, you know, at a time where they were fighting for their civil rights. And so athletes have always had a voice in terms of speaking out. And I mean, whether we're looking at athletes, we're looking at musicians, that these are individuals that do have some sort of platform in white America, and can speak to these issues, and they've done it with repercussions.
Absolutely.
For
Well,
sure.
It's undeniable that the movement has gotten attention and momentum. Undeniable. I mean, you see it everywhere you go. You see signs in people's yards saying Black Lives Matter. But what is the tone behind that? What does it entail? When you turn something progressive for the people into a business and you don't see those people benefiting from it, then it's just a business. And you got these people who, if you turn on the television right now and you see Black Lives Matter protesters, 90% of them are white or non-Black, I should say that. What happened? Why is that a thing now where you don't see the very people this is supposed to be about fighting under that tone anymore? Because people are beginning to see what has happened. You see these riots and people out here destroying things, and they put it on the name of Black people, and they're saying Black Lives Matter, and Black people are out here destroying stuff. But when you turn on the TV or you see the things that's going on, you don't see a lot of Black people throwing bricks and busting windows and things like that. They come in costumes and cover ups so that they can disguise who they are, but yet it's under our umbrella of our people.
I don't think that we are getting blamed for the.
We are.
So when I think about, the whole sort of business model of Black Lives Matter, again, you and I talked about this before, like, it is a decentralized movement, and so where the business aspect comes in, I think is pretty shaky, right? That part of it, in terms of what is made inroads to other organizations, especially if we focused on the founders like Alicia Garza and others who have continued to provide platforms to centered around empowerment of our communities, political, social, and economic. But in terms of, when we're seeing these grassroots community outbursts crying out for justice, it is us, at the forefront, but doing it in a way, in terms of marches, in terms of protests, peaceful protests. Now, with any sort of protest, you're always going to have agitators. You're going to have people who may riot. And I'm not going to disparage rioters, especially those who are acting from a place of frustration. Dr. King said it best. Rioting is the language of the unheard. And so it's, for
I don't mind riots, don't get me wrong. I don't mind them at all, because that's the way that people can express themselves. I mean, you talking about material things and the difference between material things and lives. There's no comparison.
That's right.
So
property over people.
Yeah,
that's never gonna,
not gonna.
And especially when we allow this sort of activity, when a sports team wins a championship and they destroying property downtown,
just for winning.
For winning, right?
Yeah.
And that's acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
But in terms of and you asked the question of what's different now, and why are so many other groups, why are so many whites, non-Black people, let's just put it that way, so involved in this movement? And I think it's, one, this happened during a pandemic where people could not turn away, and it's just in their faces, you know what I mean?
Or maybe they're pissed off at the government right now for doing them the way that they've done us for hundreds of years, but they got done real bad during this pandemic shutdown. People lost a lot of things that ain't being discussed in the news. The media's not talking about the loss that these people took on, and they're feeling it. And sometimes when you feel that you have no control, it's because you don't, and you realize it. So now I'm out here under the umbrella of Black Lives Matter, and I'm going to do something about it. But is it really about our lives that they're fighting for, or their lives because they're mad they lost something too?
It certainly has, deepened the divide between the haves and the have-nots, and it just brings so much light to this issue and how people are suffering, how they're responding to that suffering, what the demands are, are right now, and trying to again, I think so much of this is so big,
It's
and
huge.
but I will say this, that I want to see a day where I'm not in tears, because of a Black person, be it a man or a woman, boy or girl, having an encounter with the police that should have never resulted in that, that should have never come to that. And again, what sometimes is lost in all of this is that we're not just talking about Black males that are suffering in this way. Black women are. And it's not missed on me that even this term Black Lives Matters, was formed by women of color, who were demanding for justice, for Trayvon Martin and all of these incidents that happened post Trayvon Martin's death. But that we had to have a whole different movement say her name to acknowledge that Black women were also suffering from excessive use of force and violence at the hands of law enforcement.
So, and to kind of piggyback on that, why did they start that movement? Because to me, when you say Black lives, isn't that all of us? Doesn't that entail all of us?
It should.
I mean, if we stop separating ourselves, maybe they'll start including us for everything that we do as a people. Maybe it wouldn't be so obvious that we are apart from everything in society.
But they've always made us apart, right? And so when we think about this, right, Leo, it's not missed on me that from the beginning of our nation's formation, right, that with our very first census, even up until today, even though we know the problems that this has caused, we've always collected data on race. We have categorized people based on their race.
Absolutely.
That the term race wasn't even used until the late 1700s. Prior to that, we were known by our ethnicity, more so than anything else, right? And so you were European, you were African, or those specific countries that you were from within those continents. And so race begins to be used as a way of allotting privilege to some. And so this wonderful book called The Invention of White, right? I mean, really talks about this, the creation of white as a racial classification. And so if you are affording privilege to those who are deemed to be white, and even some of the groups that we consider white today were not considered white then, right? These were particular groups, upwardly mobile groups from various parts of Europe that were deemed such, right? Then the polar opposite of that is Black. Right?
Absolutely.
And so we're affording privilege over here and instituting disadvantage over here. And so we've always been separated based on those classifications.
That's the master plan, though. I mean, if the master has planned to do what it's doing and it's working, why would they all of a sudden be inclusive to our success? That's why I keep trying to reiterate, be careful what you put out there. The universe hears it, responds it, and it gives it right back to you. If you keep begging for your life to matter, then that's what you're going to continuously do. And it's going to continuously not matter. I exist, so I ain't going to beg for shit. I'm telling everybody that. My life matter because I'm here. Right. We got to start understanding that and be in our power, stand in our power, and use our Black power. If we're going to chant anything, chant Black power. That's not privilege. That's not going over someone's head. That's not saying that Black is better, but we are. That's not saying that to say that you don't matter. It's just saying I love who I am and I'm standing in it. Black power.
Because we can't do away with the word. I mean, it is already there.
Yeah.
We are already classified in that way, whether we want to be or not.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's for us to say, we are saying to the world that our lives matter, right? That you have not treated them as such, but we are demanding that you see them as such.
Yeah.
And so, no different than if I, when James Brown came out with his song, I'm Black and I'm proud, right? That let's take back ownership of this classification. Since you put it on us and you have given us this ascribed trait, then let's re-own it. Let's take back agency. Let's take back power.
That's real. I say stand in it, be in it, be power. Just be black. You know what it is. You know who you are. You have to understand. I want to read an excerpt of Malcolm X when we come back. We're going to take a break. Black Porter Power.
We no longer need to close our fists for the revolution, D. Open palm may show you our separation is man-made. Made in aid of cementing thoughts that turn John Doe to Adolf. Where they see weeds, we see seeds, see. We no longer need to close our fists for the revolution I've seen. Flowers grow and petals fall from mountains, surrounded by estates and suburban terrace housing. Had notions of positivity discarded like pieces of puzzles, muzzled echoes of greatness and fear. Society may not feel the same elations. We no longer need to close our fists for the revolution. We must be heard. We must be. From the depths of our bellies, from the lumps in our throats when questioned on our perception but failed to mention, we must continue to be and be in unison. Be in unison like troops with lowered arms and open palms. We no longer need to close our fists for the revolution.
To witness the hierarchy of power you deem acceptable. How the masses are all behind the power to individuals like the masses in timely political rituals stand beside me. Not just followers but just thinkers. So we no longer have to look up for guidance. We can look side by side. What side are you on? We are no different.
No age, no class, no color, no race. Like troops with lowered arms and open palms. Where they see weeds, we see seeds, see. We no longer need to close our fists for the revolution. Oh, he must be. Oh, he must be worthless if his occupation don't match your level of patience. Ooh, oh, he must be urban if his cadence drops vowels lower than where his trousers sit. Oh, he must be, they don't know my history. Oh, he must be, they don't know my history. For the knowledge they ripped out the pages. Called us thugs and beasts when we protest on stations. Because embedding our thoughts is what has a nigga run a nigga to the slave ships. Stop snitching, patience. All I ask is patience. Fear the brother on my shoulder, cause he can take my life right now when we act like we don't know no better. I so sorry. I don't really give a fuck. No, I don't really give a fuck. One hand up, have a hand gripped on my nuts. Shake, shake, man, I spent your advance on my lunch. No, I don't really give a fuck. No, I don't really give a fuck. One hand up, other hand gripped on my nuts. Shake, shake, man, I spent your advance on my lunch. Oh, you can't say that. You can't say, no, man, you can't say black. You can't say.
welcome back to Black Portal Power. So, Leo Sunfire, you were saying you have something you want to share with us from, that greatness that is Malcolm X and what he was saying about Black lives.
Well, I chose this excerpt because one of the things that I realized through this Black Lives Matter movement is that we are being used as pawns. Well, in the game of chess, where a pawn stands. I mean, it's really just the low man on the totem pole, and they moves around until it gets killed off. I mean, the job is to protect everything and everybody else before it gets to the king and the queen and the king. Well, we are pawns, and they are using us continuously to exploit or further their cause, and they can't do it in the name of what they're really upset about, meaning the other people that are non-black protesting right now, or going out doing all these big things. And I say that, I want to get back to this. I say that because just a couple of months prior to George Floyd being killed and the world got a chance to see it, Ahmaud Arbery was just shot by civilian people and nobody cared. But in just a month or two, all of a sudden the world cares that our lives matter. I'm trying to understand how that works. I'm trying to understand how that happens. I mean, did a switch go off? And I know the pandemic shut everybody down and they had time to sit there and look at it, but they've been having time to sit there and look at it for at least 50 years of television, but even more so these last 10, 5 years, 6 months, 3 months, 2 months before all of this, they had time to look at it. They had time
to go back to their lives, right? The pandemic allowed us to treat these like isolated incidents of people, be it cops who are not representative of law enforcement broadly, or people who have taken matters into their own hands, So George Zimmerman all the way through to Ahmaud's killers, right? And so Run with Ahmaud became a thing. And so I don't think that we didn't care. I think that the black community has always cared.
Not the black community. I'm not discussing the black community. We always care about our people being murdered. Sure. That's not something that, even if it's black on black crime, and I know everybody likes to bring that up, it's still, we're concerned and we're caring about one another. That's right. It's
the broader community.
A broader community, and when you people always want to get on the black on black crime when we talk about blacks, murder and the police officers. Well, every race kill each other.
Absolutely. That is not a thing. And we will never ever promote that as a thing. It's not black on black crime. It's white on white crime.
Absolutely.
Latino on Latino crime. Asian on Asian crime. All racial and ethnic groups are more likely to be killed by
someone of their own
racial or ethnic background. That has always been the pattern in terms of crime rates. And so that is just a myth used to pull us away from this fight for racial equality and for justice. And so, I think that's really important, and again, I would love to say that the attention changed and the fervor around it changed because we saw George Floyd slowly being killed. But again, I can link his case no different than I can link Ahmaud to Trayvon. These people, Absolutely. These young men who were simply going through a neighborhood that they belonged in and were killed by people acting aggressively toward them that should not have acted in that manner toward them, would not have acted. Civilians, right, who turned on another civilian, who would not have acted that way if they were white. But I can also link, George Floyd to oh my gosh, why is his name escaping me? But he was choked by the police, oh my gosh.
I know who you're talking about. I just can't think.
That is just so in New York City. And
for the Lucy's, for the cigarettes, are you talking about him? I can't think of his name either.
Alton Sterling. Eric Garner.
Eric
Thank
Garner.
you, because I'm like, how is? But you know why his name escapes me? Because there's so many names.
I know.
So many names,
That's
and the
my
ways in
point.
which. So we saw that firsthand. This man demanding, for the ability to breathe, and we were able to. The broader community was able to shut off its humanity, and try to look for reasons to justify the police acting in that manner.
Absolutely.
So again, but I don't want to get far away from this excerpt that you're going to read for us. I really want you to dig into it.
Okay, it's Malcolm X, and it says, the worst enemy that the Negro had is the white man that run around here drooling at the mouth, professing to love Negroes and calling himself a liberal. And it is following these white liberals that has perpetuated problems that the Negroes have. If the Negro wasn't taken, tricked, or deceived by the white liberal, then Negroes would get together and solve our own problems.
So and again, there's so much to unpack there.
Nah.
So much to
It's
unpack
self-explanatory to me. I can go on and on to say the reason why we have to beg for our lives or they have Black Lives Matter is because we won't stand in our own power and we won't take care of our own selves. Instead of following someone else's lead, we won't stand in our own power and lead ourselves.
So I think there's a difference between, so we've always stood in our own power. We could not have survived the atrocities of slavery, the brutality of it, as well as what followed. So you have, these hundreds of years of institutionalized slavery followed by hundreds of years, another 100 years of second-class citizenship that is institutionalized by the highest courts of our land. So I think there's a difference between understanding your self-sufficiency and your power and your agency, and then also allowing people to act as allies. And so I think those are two different things. So I think we've always stood in our own power. We could not have survived to the point that we have if we had not been demanding for power. Now, people that come alongside and groups that come alongside to act as allies, that's something different. And I will say this in terms of, I'm all about being critical of white liberals as well as white conservatives. But at the end of the day, when you institutionalize privilege among white, then whites have few incentives to give up that privilege in the various forms that it comes.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. We're not standing in power. We're standing in privilege that's been granted to us. We have been standing in the educational system that has been taught to us. We stood in the fact that if you get a degree in college and you can have this job, you're allowed to work this position and be in this power. Even when you're granted higher levels of power, the presidency, you have none. We saw that firsthand. So we're not standing in our power, we're standing in our privilege. And then when those of us that don't ever get a chance to see privilege because they have not been taught, they've not been afforded the opportunity or because of their circumstances to have those rights or those privileges, then they never get a chance to stand in anything. So our power as Black people has not been seen in hundreds of years.
But again, let me, and because of our connection, as sisters, as friends, I know I can challenge you in this way, right?
Go ahead.
So I think about when you use the example of degrees, right? And ways in which those powers have been used, right? That, we have an educational system that has been very much so slanted toward whites and white supremacy, right? Which is the fabric of this nation. But how we've used that to develop our own collective power is not missed on me. So when you think about it from this perspective, Leo, right? We have HBCUs that were formed because, again, we said, we're going to develop our own system of education.
Absolutely.
If you're going to block us out, then we're going to figure out ways to do it. We've even used their traditional forms of education to empower us. So let's go back to our guy, who we lost so suddenly and too soon, Chadwick Boseman. One of the most powerful characters he played for me was Thurgood Marshall, right? And so Thurgood Marshall had a law degree, right? A degree that was earned, again, both through HBCU channels and your Ivy League white channels.
Absolutely.
And use that to affect change in our nation. He became a Supreme Court justice and affecting change that bettered us as a people. So we've always figured out ways to work from being outsiders, becoming insiders, and working inside to affect change. And we can critique our first Black president, but there are things that happened under his administration that did better our lives, right? And so I can't
wait a minute.
Oh, let me give you some primary examples. Let me start with a field that is near and dear to me within the criminal justice field. So for the first time we ever set a mandatory minimum was for crack cocaine. Federal law that mandated that individuals could be in prison for a drug. First time it was done, it was applied to crack cocaine. That set into motion 100-to-1 disparity in terms of sentencing and charging and the amount of time people could spend incarcerated for crack cocaine, where for powder cocaine, the sentence was again, there was 100-to-1 disparity. Under his administration, we got that gap closed to it's still a huge disparity at 18-to-1, but the fight for that.
Wait a minute. We got a gap closed for what?
The crack cocaine versus powder cocaine laws.
Oh my God.
And so I use that as an example. I also use as an example the My Brother's Keeper initiative, where again we're trying to dismantle the school to prison pipeline, and again what happened there and the inroads that made in terms of changing the lives of brown and Black young men. And so there are so many things that did happen under that administration that were centered around change. No different than I think about so again, we can use so many countless examples of where we have taken a system that was designed against us, never meant for us, and we figured out ways to chip away at those institutions and make them work for us. And so not to say that we don't have a long ways to go and that none of those can't be critiqued, but we cannot ignore the things that have been done and the inroads that have been made.
I agree with you. Definitely that they have been chipped at, but we need to chunk at them in 2020. Yeah, we've been chipping at things for a long time. No, it's time to quit chipping.
Yeah,
we gotta chunk them or use some explosive. I like C4. Blow that shit up. I mean, it's time. It's 2020. We should see everything clearly now. We've been chipping away with our hammers for a long time.
This is why we are.
When are we gonna get tired of being in the condition that we are in?
Yeah,
we have to. It's time to start standing in your power. Doesn't mean you go out and be violent, but if violence comes, we already know where it comes from.
Because again, when we talk about, protests and people exercising their First Amendment rights, the only time I've seen that be acted against in a violent manner is from white, these white radicals who use violence as a way of taking us right back to where we are fighting to come from. And so, I agree, that 2020 should mean we are walking in even more power, that we demand these things and we fight really hard for, not just fight hard for them, but we make it a reality. I posted recently that, on this anniversary of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. At what point does a dream stop being a dream and become reality? But the challenges that we face again in fighting a system, not saying that it's impossible, but the time that it takes to dismantle something that was built into the fabric of a nation, it is. It's daunting sometimes. It's heavy.
I think that we like history, but we don't study it. I mean, we see it, but we don't pay attention. I mean, we see that you keep repeating the same thing.
That's good.
We can't keep marching if marching don't make a difference. Marching is just for those that want to get outside and get some exercise.
Time.
I'm just saying. Get it together, people. We gotta get it together.
Not for exercises.
Just get you some exercise. Get your calves right. Get your calves strong out there.
But I need your calves, your mind, your spirit,
All
your
day.
soul
All
strong
day.
to fight, for racial equality in our society. Whether we call it Black Lives Matters, Black Power, or we get to the point, the ideal point of not having to context it with Black, period.
Yeah.
And just say, you know what, let's return to humanity and compassion for people that my soul will hurt just as much for a Black man being killed unjustly by a police officer as it would for a white person.
Absolutely.
Or a person from any racial or ethnic background, where we are no longer identifying people based on their skin tone, but really identifying them, as Dr. King said, by the content of their character, right? And that we begin to act from a place of character, of love and compassion. And until we do that, we're going to continue to have people pouring into the streets. We're going to continue to have violence in our streets. We're going to continue to have people who are martyrs, as opposed to people who are just leaders for our nation, leaders that don't have to use their lives as a way of demanding for change.
Well, I know where change can come from. Knowing thyself. I can't say that enough. I can't spell it out enough. Know thyself. When you know thyself, you know your power. And you won't stand and allow someone else to lead you to something different.
And there you have it.
Thank you for listening to Black Portal Power. You can tune in every Monday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time on BSB Radio. Open your mind, free your soul, for the portal is open.